So today's book is going to be Earth Abides by George R. Stewart, and the coffee of choice, fittingly because we are in Mexico, is Blasón, which comes from Coatepec in the Veracruz region of Mexico. And it's actually quite a good coffee with chocolatey and kind of citrus fruit aroma, which it describes on the pack, and it actually does have that. So definitely think it's a decent coffee. And it is ideal for a mocha pot or also for drip brewing, so not bad. So today's novel is Earth Abides by George R. Stewart. It was published in 1949 and it's a dystopian science fiction story. So what comes to mind really when you think about post-apocalyptic science fiction sort of story? Marauding gangsters, cannibals, roadblocks, which eventually results in confrontation and everyone fighting each other and culminates with everyone killing each other off. Well, not here. In my opinion, Earth Abides offered something totally different to the usual theme that's attached with dystopian style novels. It's a slow yet very intriguing novel which is set in post-apocalyptic USA and follows the path of Ish, or Isherwood, who wakes up on a geography field trip and realizes that most of humanity has been wiped out by some kind of deadly plague. Yeah, that would suck. The plot follows Ish as he travels across the USA in search of some kind of community or place of belonging where he can kickstart civilization. He ultimately finds his tribe, and this book follows them through the decades as they have to make decisions, self-govern, and ultimately raise the next generation in a world devoid of humans. Ish is the protagonist, and he can be seen as quite a stubborn and controversial character who values intellect above all else in the book. He doesn't hide this with his use of words such as stupid and half-witted pretty regularly through the book towards other characters. He starts off the story as quite a reserved guy, and you may think from the beginning that he'd go down a life of more solitude, but this changes as the story goes on. He meets more people, and from then on he sort of assumes the role of leader, and as this progresses, he then dismisses the opinion and the role of quite a lot of the other characters. In terms of setting, the book's set in post-apocalyptic California, somewhere near San Francisco in the Bay Area, I believe. And it starts off with quite a positive tone, especially considering the majority of humanity's been wiped out, which again I think makes it very different from most standard post-apocalyptic novels. This does change as the story goes on. The mood does dampen quite significantly as different things happen. As Ish's tribe tackle and have to face more problems, you notice the kind of tone gradually dampen as the story goes on, and I quite like this steady progression. Another thing I quite like is that nothing massive really happens. It's just an ordinary group of people who are just tackling day-to-day life as it goes on, with the one key difference being that the vast majority of humanity has been wiped out. So I quite like this, how it differs from the usual death and destruction of a typical post-apocalyptic novel. Now, while it's definitely not a gripping page-turner, it kept me positively intrigued throughout, which in my eyes is the sign of a good story and a good book. The pace is pretty slow, but George R. Stewart adds enough spice to the story to keep it interesting, and it's clearly a very well thought out story. It was written in 1949, so some of the language and the opinions are a little bit dated, which is to be expected from a book in that era, but it's definitely not as bad as it could have been. It's a little bit sexist at times, and it does use words which over time have alternate meanings and they have become obsolete, but nowadays they'd be seen as offensive words. Now, my general opinion of the book, and something that really intrigued me, was the author's take on how humanity would proceed if very few, if any, people were left on Earth. As I've already mentioned a few times, it's a very untraditional post-apocalyptic style book, and I'm still to decide, and I don't really know if it is the way humanity would proceed if everything was in such turmoil. I really like this angle of the book, and again, I see it as a good story and a good book if I'm asking myself this sort of question. To summarize, I did really enjoy the book, and it offered something different in that it really did deviate from what you'd normally expect from this genre. Now moving on to what I didn't like about it, it's quite a character-driven plot, and the character of Ish does change significantly as the story goes on, and some things about his character did irk me. I found that his character was a bit more, and his personality was a bit more difficult to like as the story went on, and this was mostly due to his dismissal at anybody who wasn't as smart or deemed to be intellectual like he was. And I also mentioned it is quite a slow moving story, and at times it was maybe a bit too slow for my liking. There were a couple of points where I really was struggling, but to his credit, George R. Stewart did manage to up the game and salvage me in points where I was slowing down quite a bit with the story. So, in conclusion, what would happen if a virus wiped out the majority of humanity? Well, we don't actually know, but I would say this book is a deep dive on what could happen if such a thing were to occur. And like I said, this is that question that I'm still asking myself, is or isn't it what would happen? And I think again, it leaves that intrigue. I did really enjoy the book, and despite the slow pace at times, I would definitely give it a solid 4 beans. If you're into fast-paced page turners where the end of every chapter keeps your mouth watering for more, then this probably isn't for you. But if you like a slow burner with not many plot twists, just following a group of people trying to make decisions and get by, with the one caveat being they're among the last ones in humanity, then give this a shot.